Lady Thistlewick Society Papers, Volume 90, Issue 3. 2 new faces and 1 too familiar scandal arrived at Lady Ainsley's ball. Rumour has it, the Duke's cousin has more spine than a proper lady should possess and certainly more allure. But beware, dear readers, some masks are worn too well, and some gentlemen are not gentlemen at all. Lady Evangeline Beaufort had no intention of being noticed. She descended the grand staircase of Lady Ainsley's Mayfair townhouse, draped in her signature green silk, her eyes looking bored already. She was there, simply as chaperone companion. If one wanted to be cruel, dutifully attending her wide-eyed cousin Arabella, who had her sights set on any unmarried viscount with 2 legs and a title. And Evangeline? She merely sought silence, shadows, and perhaps a corner where her aching feet could rest after the next 3 reels. "Must you skulk like a governess with a secret?" murmured a dry voice beside her. She turned to see Lady Thistlewick, draped in maroon lace and arrogance, fluttering her ostrich fan like a general readying troops. "I am hardly skulking, merely observing," Evangeline replied, giving the older woman a polite curtsy. Lady Thistlewick leaned in, the diamonds in her hair glittering with mirth. "Observation, my dear, is simply gossip with a monocle. Take care, the ballroom is a hunting ground tonight." "And what prey shall be caught?" Evangeline asked wryly. Lady Thistlewick gave a wicked smile. "Why, the rarest game of Hidden Heir in hiding." Across the room, Lord Nathaniel Harwood was decidedly not enjoying himself. He had slipped away from his estate under the pretense of illness and come to London as Mr. Harwood, a man of no consequence. The season was a circus. He avoided. He had no wish to be paraded for duchesses with overfed daughters. And yet, there she was. A woman in green silk, unsmiling, eyes sharp beneath a mask. She stood with poise, but it was her stillness that drew him, like a painting waiting to be stolen. He approached her as one would approach a wild creature cautiously, with curiosity. "Are you enjoying the spectacle, miss?" he began. "I am merely surviving it," she replied coolly, turning to face him. Her voice was soft but steady, like a well-played violin. He grinned. "A fellow sufferer, then. You dance? Not with strangers." "Then allow me to become known, Nathaniel Harwood. No title, no intentions of marriage. Slightly fond of chocolate." She blinked. "An honest man at a London ball? How quaint." "I have my vices," he said, offering his hand. "Shall we waltz and shock the entire room?" She hesitated, but just as a new strain of violins began, she placed her gloved hand in his. "I warn you," she said, "I waltz like a spy and converse like a scandal." "Perfect," he replied. "I was growing terribly bored." The music swelled as Evangeline and Nathaniel moved in perfect time, her gloved fingers resting lightly against his shoulder, his hand warm and sure at her waist. Around them, couples twirled, but none drew eyes the way they did. "You dance remarkably well," she said, the words measured. He smiled with easy charm. "You sound surprised. I assumed your confidence came from your tongue, not your feet." "Ah, but I trained both equally, one for conversation, the other for persuasion." Her lips curved. "And which is in use now?" He leaned just close enough to be inappropriate. "Would it scandalize you if I said both?" It did, and how infuriating that it thrilled her, too. Evangeline had danced with dukes, counts, and marquises, most of them so preoccupied with their own reflections they scarcely noticed the woman before them. But this man, this Mr. Harwood, saw her with unnerving clarity. And yet, what was he hiding? Nathaniel, for his part, hadn't expected to enjoy the ball at all, and now he was counting the seconds until the next song would allow him another turn with the sharp-tongued enchantress in green. The waltz ended, but the electricity between them did not. "I fear we've caused a stir," she murmured as they bowed apart. "Then let us stir again." He offered his hand once more, but she, with a knowing smile, declined and walked away, the train of her gown trailing like a ribbon of smoke. Nathaniel watched her go, entirely unaware that the woman he'd just fallen into step with was not only of noble blood, but the sister of a duke, and precisely the sort of woman his family had been trying to arrange for him to marry. If only they'd known she already had his interest, though neither of them knew who the other truly was, yet. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 90, Issue 4. My dearest readers, one rarely expects a waltz to become the center of conversation the following morning, and yet, here we are. A gentleman with no title, that we know of, and a lady with more elegance than sense, if her expression at breakfast is any indication. The true identities behind those masks remain elusive, but not for long. Mark my words, every secret finds its way to my desk. Lady T. By the following morning, London's drawing rooms were abuzz, and Evangeline Beaufort was doing her best to appear unaffected as she sipped her tea in Lady Ainsley's breakfast salon. "You're brooding again," her cousin Arabella said between mouthfuls of lemon cake. "I am contemplating the architectural choices of the ceiling molding," Evangeline replied without looking up. Arabella narrowed her eyes. "You haven't been yourself since that masked waltz. Honestly, I don't see what the fuss was about. He didn't even have a crest on his cufflinks. Perhaps he thought the presence of a personality sufficient." Lady Ainsley chose that moment to float by, her expression half delighted, half determined. "My dear Miss Beaufort," she sang, "who was that masked gentleman last night? I've had 3 callers this morning asking after your dance partner." "I assure you," Evangeline said with a polite smile, "I know as little about him as anyone else." "Unlikely," Lady Ainsley sniffed. "Still, he moved like someone accustomed to far grander rooms than mine." From across the salon, Lady Thistlewick watched the exchange with the satisfied air of a hawk circling prey. She sipped her tea slowly, a stack of parchment beside her fresh ink and rumors waiting to be immortalized. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Harwood, also known as the Marquis of Eastvale, sat in the reading room of White's Club, holding a broadsheet upside down and pretending to care about the state of Prussian grain. "You're an idiot," came the voice of Lord Everett Grayson, his oldest friend and chief confidant in all things poorly advised. "She's unlike anyone I've met," Nathaniel muttered, setting the paper aside. "Witty, elegant, guarded. So, another titled lady in disguise?" Everett asked dryly. Nathaniel gave him a sharp look. "You don't know that. I don't need to. I recognize that glazed look in your eyes. It's the same one you had before you broke off that engagement last summer." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "That was political maneuvering. This is different." Everett raised a brow. "Well, if she's who I think she is, and I do think she is, you'll have to dance far more carefully. Lady Thistlewick is already sniffing." Nathaniel's stomach sank, because if Lady Thistlewick had caught the scent, it was only a matter of time before London knew every last detail, including the ones he'd gone to great lengths to hide. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 90, Issue 5. My dearest readers, there is something about a music room specially one left conveniently open that lends itself to revelations. And who, pray, might our anonymous waltzing rogue have been spotted slipping into the Duchess of Windermere's famed salon of strings, and more importantly, who followed him? Mark my words, where there is music, there is mischief, and often a great deal more. Lady T. The Duchess of Windermere's musical afternoon had not been intended as a battlefield, but it was beginning to feel like one. Evangeline stood near the French windows, the spring sun draping her shoulders in gold. Her gown was a darker green shade silk than she had worn at the previous event, embroidered with tiny silver stars at the hem, and her hair had been coaxed into curls that whispered of midnight gardens and candlelit temptation, though she, of course, claimed no such intention. And yet, she had seen him, across the salon near the trio of musicians tuning their instruments. Mr. Nathaniel Harwood, or so he was called. He had the gall to look unaffected, conversing politely with Lady Featherwick's rather dull nephew, nodding occasionally, sipping tea with the poise of someone entirely at ease. But Evangeline noticed the way he shifted his stance when he saw her, the way he moved subtly in her direction, as if by accident. "I see your rogue is present," murmured Arabella, appearing beside her with a conspiratorial smirk. "He is not my anything," Evangeline said. "You could do worse. I believe he reads books. I saw him holding one last week." "Fiction?" Evangeline arched a brow. "Philosophy, I fear." "Worse!" Arabella giggled and flitted away, leaving Evangeline with no choice but to endure the room, and him, and the knowledge that her curiosity was entirely unbecoming. She tried to avoid him, for all of 10 minutes, and then he vanished. She spotted it only because Lady Windermere's prized music room, normally off-limits during social gatherings, was ajar. She glimpsed a shoulder brushing through the door, a coat of deep navy wool. What business had a guest in a private room? Evangeline hesitated, and then she stepped forward, gliding across the hallway with the practiced ease of a woman who had learned long ago how to move unseen. The music room was bathed in soft afternoon light, its tall windows dusted with gossamer curtains. Instruments were displayed like sculptures, a pianoforte, a harp, and a glass violin case glittered in the silence. He stood near the pianoforte, running his hand lightly along the keysnot, playing, merely touching. "Admiring or attempting to steal?" she asked, arms crossed. Nathaniel didn't flinch. "Lady Evangeline, what a charmingly uncharming entrance. You are in a restricted room, and you followed me into it. We are equally guilty now." She narrowed her eyes. "Curious, isn't it, that you consistently find yourself in places you ought not to be? I could say the same of you." He turned toward her fully now, shadows dancing on his jawline. "But I suppose propriety has always been more flexible than society pretends, hasn't it? Is that how you excuse yourself? With clever lines and unreadable intentions?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Only when I'm being watched by a woman who sees far too much." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the house, a string quartet began to play. The melody floated faintly into the room. "You are not who you say you are," Evangeline said quietly. Nathaniel studied her. "What makes you so sure? You hide too easily in plain sight. You avoid introductions, and yet never seem lost. You speak like a gentleman, but dress like a guest borrowing confidence. And you dance," her voice caught. "You dance like someone trained to be admired." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not surprise, not amusement, guilt, and then, like a curtain drawn, it vanished. He stepped closer, voice lowered. "And you, Lady Evangeline, move through a room like someone tired of being watched. You speak with precision, like one who has too often been misunderstood, and you smile only when absolutely necessary." Her breath caught. "You know my name. You told me not to be a stranger," he murmured. "So I made inquiries." Evangeline's fingers curled against her gown. "I do not know who you are," she said, "but I know I should stay away." "Do you want to?" he asked gently. She hated that she hesitated. "I think," she whispered, "you are a waltz I should never have danced." And then she turned and walked out, without looking back. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 90, Issue 6. My dearest and most romantically inclined readers, a certain gentleman was seen slipping from the Duchess of Windermere's salon, looking dishevelled, and a certain lady followed not long after, her gloves suspiciously absent. What occurred in the music room I leave to your imagination, but let us say this: when melody meets mystery, it rarely ends quietly. Signed, Lady T. That evening, Evangeline escaped to the gardens behind her brother's townhouse, hoping the fresh air might clear the heat from her chest. She hated that he had seen her, not just noticed, but seen, in a way that few men ever bothered to look. It wasn't only Disarmingit was dangerous. She wandered beneath the stone arch and into the rose garden, the early spring blooms still modest but fragrant. Her fingers brushed against a trellis, and she exhaled. Twice in one day came a voice from behind her. She didn't turn. Are you following me now? I was invited, Nathaniel replied, appearing beside her with his hands behind his back. Your brother's musical supper, was it not? He rarely bothers to tell me who is on the guest list. Then consider this a pleasant surprise. She glanced sideways. That remains to be seen. Nathaniel smiled, then offered her something. A folded scrap of parchment. What is this? Something I wanted to share. She unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the lines, and her breath caught. It was a song, a melody, handwritten, brief but beautiful, with notes rising gently, falling like a sigh. You wrote this? I overheard the violinist earlier today. He played a piece that made me think of you. That is an exceptionally bold statement. I could lie and say it made me think of breakfast. Evangeline held the sheet like something fragile. You're a composer? He shook his head. Not formally. Music is a refuge. My family never encouraged it. Your family, she said slowly, whom you never speak of. Nathaniel's jaw tensed. I will tell you the truth, he said, but not here, and not yet. Then when? When I've earned it. She looked at him, eyes full of suspicion and something softer underneath. I am not easily charmed. I rather hoped you wouldn't be. And then he bowed, just once, and disappeared into the garden's twilight. Evangeline stared down at the notes once more, and wondered what kind of man wrote music for a woman he had no right to want. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 90, Issue 7. My dearest readers, a letter can ruin a reputation just as easily as it can protect one. And when letters are passed in secret beneath fans, behind books, or slipped into gloves, we know better than to trust a postmark. An anonymous correspondent, an evasive nobleman, and a young lady with sharper instincts than she lets on. If only they knew what I knew. Signed, Lady T. The post arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, as it always did. Evangeline sat in the Beaufort morning room, sunlight illuminating the parchment she held like truth through stained glass. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly. Not that Arabella would notice a cousin was absorbed in a society column and cackling over someone else's misfortune. The envelope bore no crest, only her name in an unfamiliar but precise hand. Inside, a folded sheet, a single sentence. He is not who he claims, and neither are you. But you already knew that, didn't you? No signature, no location, no sign of who might know enough to write such a thing. Her chest tightened. Was it about him or her? Because Evangeline's lie of being a lady's companion rather than the Duke of Windermere's sister was necessary, yes, but no less dangerous than his. And still, Nathaniel occupied her thoughts like an echo that refused to fade. The music room encounter had haunted her for days. He'd looked at her like a man trying to decide between temptation and wisdom, then chosen neither, vanishing before she could say another word. She should have let it lie, but instead she wrote a letter of her own. Mr. Harwood, you are cordially invited to the Beaufort Spring Recital this Friday. Bring no mask this time, or bring two if you still require one. Signed E.B. It was a bold move, one a proper lady should never make. She sent it anyway. The spring recital was an affair of strings and social maneuvering. The Beaufort estate overflowed with carriages, parasols, and practiced laughter. Music was the excuse. Marriage negotiations the real sport. Nathaniel arrived late, alone. No formal invitation, just a note tucked inside his coat pocket. Note. He found her in the East Garden, where the music had spilled out onto the lawns and guests lingered near rose-draped trellises. She was dressed in pale green muslin, her dark hair pinned high with pearls. She looked like a Botticelli painting left to breathe. "You invited me," he said simply. Evangeline didn't turn. "I did. Why?" "Because I tire of pretending I haven't been trying to understand you." "Then allow me to confess something." She faced him then, brows arched. "I'm listening." Nathaniel stepped closer, not enough to breach propriety, but enough that they both felt it. "I don't like games, Lady Evangeline. Not the kind with masks. Not the kind where titles dangle like swords." She laughed, dry and sharp. "Then you've chosen the wrong city. I didn't choose London, it chose me. Or rather my family's expectations did." There, a glimpse. "You are titled," she said softly. His jaw flexed. "I was not lying when I said my name was Harwood. But it's not the one they use at court, and I've been judged enough by the weight of it to know I'd rather be seen for who I am than what I inherit." She stared at him. "Then why come at all?" "Because I heard music, and I saw you." A pause. "Then you hide your name, I hide my station. What a perfectly matched pair of liars we make." He smiled. "Shall we try honesty then?" She took his hand, and they walked into the recital together unmasked, if not yet unburdened. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 9, Issue 8. My dearest readers, when the Duke of Wintermere returns to London early, one expects invitations, declarations, perhaps even duels. But what he returns to is far more delicious. A sister too entangled in the gaze of a stranger, and a stranger who might not be one at all. And if you think this web is already tangled, wait until the Duke makes his introductions or fails to. Signed, Lady T. The drawing-room had never felt smaller. Evangeline stood by the fireplace, trying not to clench her hands. Arabella had just dropped her teacup and, for once, it wasn't out of clumsiness. The Duke of Wintermere had returned from his diplomatic journey 3 weeks earlier than expected, and he was not pleased. He stood near the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding the kind of noble authority that made most men stammer. Nathaniel Harwood, Marquess of East Valledid, not stammer. The Duke's eyes narrowed. "You're in my home." Nathaniel met his gaze evenly. "So it seems." Arabella whispered, "Oh dear," under her breath, and tried to become one with the wallpaper. Evangeline took a breath. "Brother, this is Mr. Harwood. Mr. Harwood, my brother, His Grace the Duke." Wintermere arched a brow. "Mr. Harwood, strange. I know every Harwood in Parliament, and several outside it. And yet," Nathaniel didn't flinch, "I find titles often precede character. I prefer to lead with the latter." "A philosopher," the Duke said coolly. "How refreshing." "I prefer musician," Nathaniel replied, nodding toward the quartet still awkwardly pretending to rehearse in the adjacent salon. Evangeline wanted to throttle them both, or herself. The tension broke when Lady Windermere herself entered with fanfare and far too much perfume, announcing luncheon and scattering the scene like birds startled from a branch. But as Nathaniel walked beside her to the table, Evangeline leaned in and whispered, "I must warn you, my brother is not easily charmed." Nathaniel smirked. "Good, neither am I." Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 9, Issue 9. My dearest readers, when the Duke of Wintermere arrives in London, society notices. Carriages slow, fans flutter, and matchmaking mothers develop sudden, fainting spells of inspiration. But when the Duke's sister has been posing as a mere companion, and her dance partner turns out to be far more than he seems, well, let us say this season may end with a waltzer, a war. Signed, Lady T. The drawing room fell silent the moment the Duke of Wintermere crossed the threshold. His entrance was not grand, not theatrical, but his reputation preceded him like a trumpet, fanfare elegant, icy, and unquestionably powerful. Evangeline rose from the settee, spine ramrod straight. Her teacup had gone cold in her hand. "Brother," she said carefully. The Duke's piercing grey eyes landed on Nathaniel with an appraisal that could have peeled wallpaper. "I did not expect to find company," he said mildly, "nor my sister at a recital thrown in her own name while still parading as a lady's companion." Evangeline's heart thudded. "I thought the delay in your return granted me some freedom." "Freedom is a privilege, not a right, and certainly not one to be spent dancing with." "Whom, precisely?" Nathaniel stepped forward, calm as ever. "Nathaniel Harwood." The Duke arched a brow. "And are you the same Nathaniel Harwood whose family seat lies in Northumberland?" "Yes." "Then we've met before. Years ago at Whitehall. You were the Viscount's son, newly returned from Cambridge, if I recall." The room held its breath. Arabella, now seated beside the pianoforte, looked like she was watching the final act of a play she'd very much hoped would turn tragic. "I was," Nathaniel admitted, "though my father is now the Earl." Evangeline stared. "You're Nathaniel Whitmore?" He turned to her, shame flickering just behind his composure. "I used my mother's maiden name, Harwood. I didn't lie. I merely simplified the truth. You let me think you were a gentleman without consequence. And you let me think you were a companion with no claim to station." The air between them sharpened, but the Dukiva the strategist softened his tone. "You both took liberties, but I'm less concerned with false names than with intentions. Mr. Whitmore, your attentions toward my sister honorable." A flicker of something unreadable passed between them. "They are," Nathaniel said. "And your family?" "They are less honorable, which is why I came as myself, not as them." The Duke nodded once. It was not approval, but it was something. "I will make inquiries," he said finally. "And you, sister, will prepare to return to our townhouse. You've spent enough time pretending to be someone you're not." He left with all the force of a storm retreating, but leaving a flooded room behind. That evening, in the golden hush of twilight, Nathaniel found Evangeline standing in the rose garden, arms wrapped around herself. "I never meant to deceive you," he said softly. "I don't know if I'm more angry that you did, or that I understand why." He took a step closer. "I didn't want to be chosen for a title. I wanted to know who I was. Without expectations, without legacy. I wanted the same. And now we both know how hollow our illusions were." He looked at her, heart bare. "What happens now?" She paused. Then, with a voice that trembled despite its resolve, "Now, we find out who we are when no one is watching." Lady Thistlewick's postscript. My dearest readers, it appears love and deception make excellent dance partners, but what melody shall they choose next? And what, I wonder, will happen when one more secret slips through the cracks, because yes, there is another, and it is delicious. Signed, Lady T. It would appear the gossip sheets had vested interest in this season's mystery, as it was quick to publish another titled A Masquerade of Truths. Lady Thistlewick's Society Papers, Volume 9, Issue 10. My dearest readers, if there is one thing I adore more than an actual masquerade ball, it is a life that becomes one. Masks, after all, are not always made of satin and velvet. Sometimes they are names, sometimes intentions, and sometimes secrets like those kept by a certain Miss B, who is in fact no Miss at all, or a Mr. H, who may need to learn that love demands unmasking one's past before one's future can ever be claimed. Signed, Lady T. The Kensington Masquerade was the highlight of the season. An invitation was currency, attendance a statement, and within the glittering candlelit halls of the Markham estate, gossip moved faster than music. Evangeline adjusted her filigree mask, emerald green to match the embroidery of her gown. Her heart thudded not from the thrill of dancing, but because Nathaniel was here, somewhere among the crowd. She hadn't seen him since the rose garden. The Duke had grown suspiciously silent since making his inquiries. And as for Nathaniel's family, rumors abounded. A troubled estate, a lawsuit, a brother gone missing, and yet... She turned toward the ballroom entrance and there he stood. His mask was black with silver trim, his coat finely cut but not ostentatious. He wore no sash of title, no crest. Only a small pin at his collar, barely noticeable, unless one knew what the Whitmore raven looked like. Their eyes met. He crossed the room without a word, without apology, without permission. "Dance with me," he said. "I should say no. You should." But she took his hand. They moved into the waltz, like they had that first night. But now, every step carried weight. Every turn was laced with everything unsaid. "You were right," he said softly, not looking at her face. "There is another secret, and I must tell it before anyone else does." Her fingers tensed slightly against his. "What have you done?" He swallowed. "My brother, the true heir to our title, has disappeared 3 years ago. No one speaks of it. They say he fled debts. Others believe he was murdered. And what do you believe? I believe he was betrayed by our father and sent away. And now they expect me to take up the name, the power, the estateas if he never existed. I cannot accept it." Evangeline felt her breath hitch. "And you're next in line?" "I am, which makes me a catch, as they say." His smile was bitter, and also a danger, "because I plan to uncover the truth, even if it means unraveling my entire legacy." She looked up at him. "You are a man at war with his own name." He met her gaze, pain burning through the silver mask. "And I'm standing here asking a woman who isn't who she claimed to be to trust me again." Evangeline's voice dropped. "We're both more honest in disguise, aren't we?" He took a breath. "Would you consider being at my side? Not as a duchess, not as a pawn, but as an equal." The music slowed. The room blurred. She stepped back. "I would, if I could trust that you know what you're choosing. Loving someone like me, someone who has no intention of returning to the cage she escaped, requires more than romantic declarations." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Then let me prove it." That night, Evangeline received another letter. This one from Lady Thistlewick herself. "My dearest Lady Evangeline, I have done you the kindness of remaining silent for now, but your name, your lineage, and your masquerade are no longer secrets to me. If you wish to retain your independence and your heart, I suggest you read tomorrow's column with great interest. A storm is coming." Signed, Lady T. The next day, Lady Thistlewick Society Papers Special Edition. My dearest, dearest readers, what is nobility if not a performance. One Miss Evangeline Beaufort who, it turns out, is no poor companion. But the sister of the Duke of Winter Marie has proven herself quite the actress this season, and her waltzing partner, none other than Viscount Nathaniel Whitmore, presumed heir to the Whitmore estate and a family scandal buried in shadow. But fear not, your faithful Thistlewick has uncovered every masked lie. The question is, will they choose ruin or each other? Signed, Lady T. The drawing-room at the Wintermere townhouse was as cold as the scandal that now consumed the city. The Duke tossed the paper onto the hearth. You should have told me. Evangeline stood tall. You wanted me hidden. I chose visibility. I chose possibility. You also chose the Whitmore boy. He chose me before he knew my name. That must count for something. The Duke's expression softened just a fraction. It does, but it may not be enough to shield you from this. A knock at the door. It was Nathaniel. His coat was undone, his expression unreadable. I've come to ask for her hand, he said without preamble. The Duke raised a brow. Do you not fear this scandal will destroy your claim? I do, which is why I'm prepared to give it up. Silence. I've sent word to my family. I'm abdicating my claim. I will not take my brother's place until I know what happened to him, and I will not let them use Evangeline as part of their redemption. Evangeline's lips parted. You would walk away from your title for me? I would walk away from everything that requires me to lie, but I will not walk away from you. She crossed the room and took his hand. The Duke exhaled. Well, it seems society may tear itself apart, or crown you both fools in love. I've never minded being a fool, Evangeline murmured. Nathaniel smiled. Shall we give them one last waltz to write about? That evening, in the center of Lady Markham's ballroom, under the flicker of 100 candles, they danced again. No masks, no lies, just Nathaniel Whitmore and Lady Evangeline Beaufort, two hidden heirs found at last. Lady Thistlewick's final note. Oh, my beloved readers, do not despair. Love, it seems, has once again outwitted title, tradition, and even my own pen, but rest assured, I shall keep watching. After all, every waltz must end but the music. The music always begins again. Signed, Lady T. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to be the first to know when another scandalously romantic story and love match hits hot off the press.